Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision. You think of it like engineering or something.
Right, yeah, it offers a sense of comfort.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the black film, and the doctor just points at it and says, well, there it is.
We inherently crave those categories. I mean, we want the world to be visible and binary. It's either broken or not broken.
But then you step into the world of complex neurodevelopment or severe psychological trauma, and suddenly that pristine x-ray machine is just entirely useless.
Oh, absolutely. The categories break down.
You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky. It actively resists being boxed in, and that feeling, that sensation of stepping into unpredictable, shadowy waters where standard categories fail you, that is exactly the mission we're embarking on for you today.
It's going to be a heavy one.
It really is. We are mapping out the end-to-end narrative architecture of this wildly ambitious book called San Vitae, The Awakening by D.P. Kirk. And when I say it defies categorization, I mean it treats traditional genre boundaries like mere suggestions.
Yeah, it really does.
It is this intoxicating cocktail of hard-boiled noir, visceral body horror, and sweeping post-apocalyptic dark fantasy.
It demands a lot from its audience, honestly, because the narrative architecture refuses to stay static. You have to constantly adjust your footing.
Exactly. For a new reader, or for you listening right now, stepping into this universe can feel like being shoved into the deep end of a very dark, very bloody pool.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
You settle in thinking you're reading a gritty, localized detective story about political corruption, and before you can even catch your breath, you're fighting for your sanity in a post-apocalyptic wasteland against literal gods.
The whiplash is real.
So real. So our goal today is to provide you with a comprehensive, fully illuminated roadmap of this narrative. We want to break down the underlying mechanics of the plot, dissect the incredibly high-stakes magic system, and explore the intense psychological torment that drives the story forward.
Right, so you actually have a guide.
Yes. By the time we finish this deep dive, you will know exactly what kind of harrowing, thrilling ride to expect when you crack open the source material.
And a roadmap is essential here, primarily because the world building does not hold your hand at all. To give you the fundamental groundwork of the setting, the world of San Vitae is just fundamentally broken.
Broken is putting it mildly.
Seriously. It was fractured generations ago by a cataclysmic event that the characters refer to as a scar in the heavens.
A scar where celestial spheres actually crash down to Earth. And I want to pause on that image because it's not just a distant myth in the background. The fallout from that celestial collision created the core engine of this entire universe.
Precisely. From the devastating ash of that celestial impact emerged this substance, or perhaps a force, called Vitae.
And we should clarify, this isn't normal magic.
No, not at all. Now, it is crucial to understand that Vitae is not your standard, sparkly fantasy magic. You cannot just wave a wand and conjure fire. Vitae is a heavy, burdensome, almost radioactive power.
Like, it carries a physical weight to it.
Exactly. The humans, who somehow survived exposure to it and learned to manipulate it within their own bloodstreams, became known as the San Vitae.
Right.
They're immensely powerful, they no longer age naturally, and they have consolidated power to act as the protectors and the undisputed rulers of the few remaining enclaves of civilization.
But there is a colossal catch, because, I mean, I feel like in any magic system where the users don't age, somebody else is definitely paying the toll.
Oh, absolutely. That is the grim reality of this world.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the population are regular humans, referred to as sans. They don't possess this magic.
But they're still trapped in the system.
Right. They serve a vital, inescapable purpose. See, the San Vitae cannot naturally sustain the enormous energetic cost of the magic coursing through them. If they try, the power basically consumes their minds, driving them into a state of rabid, monstrous madness.
Which is terrifying.
To stave off this madness, the San Vitae must regularly consume blood and raw vitae directly from the sands.
Okay, let's unpack this because we have this massive, sweeping, almost biblical backstory involving celestial spheres plummeting from the sky and generating an entirely new class of superhuman rulers.
It's a huge setup.
It is. But the brilliance of Kirk's writing is that the story does not start with some grand Tolkien-esque battle of gods. It starts entirely on the street level. We transition from this sweeping macro world building right down into the rain-slicked grit of our protagonist's daily life.
Yeah, we're introduced to the protagonist, Kurien. He holds the title of a San Vitae conscript.
Which, if we look at what he actually does day to day, feels like a highly sanitized term for a personal enforcer, a bodyguard, and an executioner.
That is exactly his function, yeah. Kurien is downed in service to Covenness Myasuchi, the ruler of an independent, walled city called Roanthe. And the atmosphere established in these opening chapters is pure, unadulterated noir.
It just drips with atmosphere. You have the rain-slicked cobblestone streets, the dense shadows, the constant moral ambiguity.
Right, it feels very grounded.
Yeah. We first meet Kurien waking up exhausted on a velvet lounge in a grand library, swatting away a cat named Fenris. It feels so small and intimate. But immediately, the narrative thrusts us into what he's actually up against in the city.
There's that great early scene with the merchant.
Yes. There's this incredibly tense scene early on with a haughty, very wealthy sands merchant. Kurien confronts this man and realizes the merchant is secretly intoxicated on something called corrupted vitae.
Which is such a cool detail.
Oh.
The world building layers in an entire illicit economy here. Corrupted vitae is harvested from drugged, desperate servants.
It's so gross.
It is. The merchant is getting high on a diluted, twisted version of the very magic that keeps the San Vitae alive. It perfectly establishes the localized corruption of Roant. You have a classic hard-boiled setup where the elite are exploiting the vulnerable.
Totally taking their walled safety for granted.
Right. While the gritty enforcer Kurien is forced to navigate the muck and clean up their messes.
And Kurien operates by a deeply internalized, strict moral code. I mean, he doesn't just arrest this merchant or hand him over to some city guard. He uses his abilities to terrorize the man into sobriety.
He really does.
He shatters the merchant's silver viper cane into splinters with his bare hands, causing the man to just lose control of his bodily functions right there in the street.
It demonstrates Kurien's approach to justice so well. It is brutal, instantaneous, and highly effective. He views the elite class of Roant as self-indulgent parasites who have completely forgotten the horrors that exist outside the city walls.
He actually calls them a city of self-indulgent amnesiacs. And this brings me to the geopolitical structure governing this entire dynamic. They operate under a treaty called the Diedraith Accord.
A very complicated document.
Right. I spent a lot of time reviewing the notes on this specific document, and I have to push back on the way the ruling class frames it.
Go for it.
The text presents it as a mutual covenant of protection. But reading the mechanics of it, it reads exactly like a mafia protection racket dressed up as a feudal treaty.
It really does sound like extortion.
Exactly. The San Vitae promise to protect the humans from external threats. But in exchange, the humans are required by law to submit and offer up their blood. I mean, how can we view this as a legitimate treaty? It seems like a dressed-up extortion racket where ordinary people are treated as nothing more than walking human juice boxes.
Your reaction is exactly the tension Kirk wants to cultivate in the reader, honestly.
Yeah.
You are hitting on the core political precariousness of this society.
So it's supposed to feel unfair?
Very much so. By any modern democratic standard, it is fundamentally extortionate. However, within the context of the post-cataclysmic world, it was literally the only functional alternative to extinction.
Right, because before the Accord.
Before the Accord, the San Vitae were losing their minds and just hunting humans in the streets. The Accord institutionalized the feeding to prevent mass slaughter. Myasuchi, the ruler of Roant, uses this Accord as a geopolitical shield. She is walking an impossibly precarious diplomatic tightrope.
Because she isn't just dealing with unhappy citizens, right? She has massive external threats breathing down her neck.
Correct. She is utilizing the strict tenets of the Accord to keep Roant independent from two warring global factions.
The big players.
Exactly. On one side, you have the Santerrie. This is a massive authoritarian ruling council of the San Vitae who want to absorb Roant into their empire.
And on the other side,
you have the Humanes La Luna. They are a faction of militant, anti-magic human zealots who view the San Vitae as demonic oppressors and want to eradicate them entirely.
And Kurien is the singular deterrent keeping those factions from storming the gates. I mean, he is the muscle keeping that fragile, localized peace intact.
Yes. Myasuchi's authority rests entirely on two pillars, her stoic public presence and Kurien's willingness to enforce her will with extreme prejudice. But this dynamic is severely complicated by the interpersonal relationships at play, specifically the women in Kurien's life.
Oh, the femme fatales. You cannot build a proper noir narrative without complex, dangerous women who blur the line between ally and threat.
No, you really can't.
And in Roanthe, we have twin sisters who dominate Kurien's existence. First, there's Myasuchi herself. She is aloof, impossibly powerful, exceedingly proper, and constantly hiding her expressions behind tinted spectacles.
She's very composed.
But beneath that stoic, regal exterior, she harbors this deep, forbidden romantic love for Kurien. They are bound by duty, but any sort of romantic or physical bond between a ruling Covenness and a conscript is strictly outlawed by the Santerrie.
Right, it's highly illegal.
It creates this agonizing, unspoken tension that just simmers underneath every single interaction they have.
And acting as her perfect, chaotic foil is her twin sister, Rikuko.
Rikuko is pure nightmare fuel. I'm just going to say it.
She really is. She takes the quiet tension of Myasuchi and twists it into overt psychological warfare.
Like, how does she do that?
Well, she is the embodiment of visceral discomfort within the narrative. Rikuko doesn't just play verbal mind games. She physically manifests cognitive dissonance to keep her enemies off balance.
Oh, right, her appearance.
Yes. Because of her mastery over Vitae, Rikuko possesses the power to look however she desires. But she actively chooses to appear as a young, innocent schoolgirl.
Which is creepy enough.
But then she dresses herself in the torn, blood-stained, mismatched clothing of the people she has murdered.
Yes. There's a specific scene where she sits on her sister's desk, intentionally flashing Kurien her marred, blood-stained lace underwear. She is actively, aggressively trying to unbalance him.
It's deeply psychological.
It really is. She preys on his primal, masculine instincts while simultaneously wearing the evidence of her own sociopathic murders. It is just deeply unsettling for you as the reader to experience.
It serves a crucial thematic purpose, though. Rikuko strips away the polite, diplomatic veneer of the Didrith Accord. While Myasuchi tries to govern with civility, Rikuko forces Kurien and the audience to confront the monstrous, predatory reality of what the San Vitae truly are beneath their fine clothes.
Which transitions us perfectly out of the political sphere and down into the biology of this world. Because this fragile, gritty, noir status quo, the narrative violently shatters it.
It doesn't last long.
No. The book pulls you from this localized detective story straight down into the underlying horror of the magic system itself. We really need to explore what Vitae actually is and how it functions inside a human body.
Well, Vitae is fascinating because it fundamentally rejects the traditional fantasy trope where magic is simply an unlimited pool of external mana that a wizard just taps into without any consequence.
Right, it's not just casting spells.
In Kirk's world, utilizing magic demands a heavy physical and psychological toll. It requires blood. It requires profound sacrifice. And most terrifyingly, it requires severe physical transformation.
Yeah, when Kurien enters a combat state, he doesn't just wave his hands and recite incantations. He undergoes what the text refers to as feral transformations.
They are intense.
I want to know how this works mechanically because the descriptions are so intense. His skin tightens and turns to a tough, armor-like leather. His eyes shift to a glowing, feral yellow. His teeth elongate into fangs.
And his hand.
Right, his fingers undergo this gruesome alchemical shift, becoming bladed claws of exposed bone and metal. His body viscerally tears itself apart to become a weapon. How does Vitae actually facilitate that?
The Vitae acts as a radical, hyper-accelerated mutagen. When a San Vitae calls upon their power, they are essentially forcing their cellular structure to rapidly adapt to a hostile, hyperlethal environment. Yeah, the Vitae reconstructs calcium and iron in the bloodstream into external weaponry, but the biological cost is just immense. The body is not meant to house that kind of kinetic energy.
And the cost isn't just physical. The true horror element of this magic system and where the book really sinks its hooks into you is the psychological price. Using Vitae is never free. Every single San Vitae is constantly haunted by something called the Vitae demon.
It is the unavoidable byproduct of housing celestial energy within a mortal mind.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the narrative does not treat this demon as a vague, abstract metaphor for addiction or the corrupting influence of absolute power.
No, it's very literal.
The demon is a distinct, localized presence within their minds. It has its own voice. It talks to Kurien. It taunts him relentlessly. It actively preys on his darkest, most repressed desires, specifically his longing for Myasuchi.
The demon is insidious because it is not just mindlessly aggressive. It operates as a highly intelligent manipulator.
Give us an example.
Well, there is a harrowing scene where Kurien is attempting to use his Vitae to gently heal an injury Myasuchi sustained. During this incredibly delicate, intimate moment, the demon speaks directly into his mind.
Oh, I remember this.
It calls him a beastly little boy who is just using the magic as an excuse to grope a helpless woman. It tries to degrade his noble intentions, constantly offering him immense, unchecked power and the immediate fulfillment of his carnal desires in exchange for just a sliver of his control. It wants to take the wheel of his consciousness.
It is a constant, grinding psychological assault. And the text provides these brutal, visceral flashbacks to Kurien's youth, showing us exactly how his mind was forged to withstand this daily torture.
The training sequences.
Yeah, we get to see his early training under a man named Master Gothic. Imagine a frozen, desolate, snow-covered mountain arena. Gothic is this massive, unyielding, bear-like figure who just mercilessly beats a young Kurien.
He is brutal.
He kicks him while he's down in the snow, breaking his ribs, berating him, telling him he lacks the spirit of the pack.
Gothic's methodology is born of absolute necessity, though. He beats Kurien relentlessly to systematically break down any inherent weakness or hesitation.
Because the world demands it.
Exactly. Gothic is teaching him that the post-cataclysmic world offers zero margin for error. Gothic himself carries deep, visible trauma. He has a heavily scarred brow that he actively refuses to heal with Vitae.
Right, as a reminder.
Yes, he keeps the disfigurement as a permanent physical reminder to never underestimate an opponent and to never rely entirely on magic. And through Gothic's brutal tutelage, the reader also learns the grim history of the world before the Dietrich Accord was signed.
Right, the era when the magic was wild and unregulated.
Exactly. Gothic recounts a time when regular humans, the Sands, willingly sacrificed their own lives in absolute droves. They would allow themselves to be drained completely dry of blood and vitae, embracing death simply to keep their sand protectors from succumbing to the demon and slaughtering entire settlements.
That history adds such an incredible emotional weight to Kurien's existence. I mean, he isn't just fighting for his own sanity. He is carrying the crushing historical weight of thousands of human sacrifices.
That's a huge burden.
The Sands gave their lives so the San Vitae wouldn't become mindless monsters. So you look at Kurien in the present day, he is burdened by this tragic history, scarred by his brutal training under Gothic, constantly fighting off the whispers of a manipulative demon in his ear, all while harboring this overwhelming, forbidden devotion to Myasuchi.
The psychological architecture creates a pressure cooker of massive proportions. You have a protagonist who is manually holding back a tidal wave of violence, madness, and desire every single second of his waking life, entirely out of a profound sense of duty and love.
And eventually, you can only compress that much pressure for so long before the entire system just blows apart.
It has to give.
Which brings us to the most shocking, destabilizing pivot in the entire novel. As a reader, you think you have the rhythm figured out. You think you're settling in for a slow-burn noir romance with dark fantasy elements. And then the bottom completely falls out.
It is a masterclass in subverting narrative expectations. We reach the primary turning point of the first act. Following a massive political eruption in Roanth, Kurien and Myasuchi are forced to flee the city in a concealed carriage.
It's super tense.
And inside the dark confines of this carriage, after 20 years of meticulously repressed longing, 20 years of unspoken tension and stolen glances, they finally consummate their love.
Finally.
It is a desperate, passionate, intensely vulnerable moment where they both recognize their time is rapidly running out.
It feels like the emotional summit of the story. The tension finally breaks, but immediately, and I mean in the very next breath after this profound moment of intimacy, Myasuchi turns Kurien over to the Inquisitors.
Yeah, it's wild.
These are the brutal, high-tech, heavily armored enforcers of the Santerrie Council. She drives the carriage straight to them and surrenders him to be imprisoned. And I have to ask you, and I want you listening to really consider this, why would she do this?
That's the big question.
Do we interpret this as a cold-blooded, calculated political betrayal to save her own city? Or is it a desperate, heartbreaking sacrifice, giving up his freedom to save his life from the Santerrie assassins who are hunting him?
The overwhelming tragedy of the scene is found in Kurien's reaction, I think. He accepts this fate completely willingly.
Which is so sad.
Out of his pure, untainted devotion to her, he does not raise a hand against the Inquisitors.
Oh.
He allows himself to be shackled and taken, firmly believing that Myasuchi, with her superior political mind, has made the only tactical choice that will ensure her own survival against the machinations of the Council and the chaotic threat of her sister Rikuko.
He internalizes it instantly. He tells himself, I will not cause her greater pain by resisting. It is absolutely gut-wrenching.
It really is.
But his quiet submission leads the reader into a grueling, horrifying shift in the tone of the book. We leave the dark fantasy noir completely behind, and we enter pure, agonizing survival horror. Kurien is transported to the Santerrie Inquisitor's vault.
The sheer horror of the vault sequence cannot be overstated. He is stripped of his dignity and locked in a pitch-black sensory deprivation cell.
It's so claustrophobic.
He is physically restrained inside a highly mechanized Iron Maiden device. And the timeline is what shatters the reader. He isn't held there for a few days of interrogation. He is immobilized in total darkness, unable to move a single muscle, for 12 uninterrupted years.
12 years. Just sit with the reality of that timeline for a second. 12 years of absolute stillness and pain.
Throughout that entire decade-plus duration, mechanized needles continuously pierce his flesh, slowly and methodically draining his vitae.
Oh, brutal.
But the narrative reveals a crucial detail here. The vitae the Inquisitors are extracting from him isn't the standard crimson energy of a normal San Vitae. They are draining ultra-pure, pitch-black vitae.
Which cracks open the massive revelation of why he is being subjected to this unimaginably complex torture. The Inquisitors aren't just punishing him for breaking a political treaty, they're conducting deep, invasive research. Because Kurien is fundamentally different. He is revealed to be a Sanite.
Right, a Sanite. This represents a forgotten, almost mythical evolutionary leap in their species biology.
How so?
Well, they are beings capable of harnessing the demon aspect directly, rather than fighting it. While a standard San Vitae must internally process magic, which causes massive physical friction and degradation, a Sanite can manipulate the very essence of their surroundings seamlessly.
So he's way more powerful.
The Santerrie Council is entirely terrified of him. They recognize that a fully realized Sanite could rival the power of the original celestial gods of this world. Therefore, they lock him in the dark to study his latent, automated defensive mechanisms, desperately trying to figure out how to kill him before he realizes his own potential.
But the human mind, even an evolutionarily advanced one, cannot be locked in a dark box of endless pain for over a decade without it shattering into a million pieces. And this is where Kirk dives incredibly deep into psychological horror.
The hallucinations.
Yes, to cope with the endless cyclical agony of the Iron Maiden's needles, Kurien's consciousness completely fractures. He begins to vividly hallucinate entirely different realities just to escape the physical sensation of his own body.
The granular detail Kirk provides in these hallucinatory sequences is just staggering. Kurien's mind effectively splits into distinct personas.
Yeah, tell us about the Tokyo one.
In one deeply realized alternate reality, he genuinely believes he is a young man named Lotus living in modern-day Tokyo. He experiences a catastrophic earthquake that somehow triggers a viral zombie outbreak, and he is desperately navigating this collapsing urban cityscape alongside a young girl named Kiki.
Yes, the Tokyo sequence. They're crawling through the dust-filled air ducts of a ruined building, watching terrified civilians be torn apart by the undead below them.
It's terrifying on its own.
And just as that narrative reaches a peak, the reality abruptly shifts again. Suddenly, he wakes up wearing a highly advanced futuristic spacesuit. He believes he is stationed on a massive spaceship called the Salvation, orbiting the moon, dealing with alternate space drives and complex artificial intelligence systems.
These sequences are brilliant because they vividly illustrate the sheer, unfathomable desperation of his psyche.
His brain is trying anything.
His mind is actively inventing these elaborate, terrifying, high-stakes nightmares simply because navigating a zombie apocalypse or a failing spaceship is fundamentally preferable to the stagnant, inescapable, agonizing reality of the Iron Maiden.
It is a psychological coping mechanism cranked up to its absolute maximum limit. But there is a breaking point. You can only push a godlike entity so far before the internal dam collapses.
Right, the 12-year mark.
After 12 years of being systematically drained, 12 years of his mind wandering through vivid alternate realities, Kurien's demonic side, the savage beast he spent his entire life suppressing for Myasuchi's sake, fully wrests control of his physical body.
And the ensuing breakout sequence delivers one of the most explosive, cathartic payoffs in the entire narrative structure.
It is intensely cinematic. His pure black vitae forcefully erupts from his pores. It doesn't just form a shield, it creates this swirling, impenetrable maelstrom of absolute malice around him.
It's an awesome visual.
He steps out of the Iron Maiden and walks down the pristine corridors of the vault. The elite Inquisitors are desperately firing their high-tech, concentrated energy weapons at him, and he does not even flinch. The Black Vitae simply absorbs or deflects the blasts.
And then he fights back.
Oh, yeah. He weaponizes his own blood, extending these jagged, hyper-dense spikes that effortlessly reduce the heavily armored Inquisitors into a fine red mist. He bypasses the massive, multi-ton vault door not by pushing it, but by altering the chemical composition of his vitae to act as a hyper-corrosive acid, instantly eating through the retaining rods.
It is an exhibition of raw, unadulterated vengeance. The reader feels a surge of triumph here, but that triumph is incredibly short-lived.
Because of what he finds outside.
Because when he finally steps out of the underground vault, expecting to find the complex political world he left behind 12 years ago, he discovers something infinitely worse.
The city of Roantha, his home, the exact place he sacrificed his freedom, his sanity, and his left to protect, is entirely gone. It is a smoldering ruin.
The genre shifts violently once again. We have fully abandoned the city noir aesthetics and the confined survival horror, and we are violently thrust into a sprawling, full-blown, post-apocalyptic war zone.
It's just devastating.
A massive three-way war of attrition has utterly decimated the region over the last 12 years. The authoritarian Santerrie forces, the anti-magic humane zealots, and a terrifying new faction of undead creatures known as anti-sans are endlessly tearing what is left of the world apart.
We need to define anti-sans because they change the threat level entirely. Anti-sans are essentially Vitae-starved zombies. They are empty husks, completely possessed by the feral demon aspect, and they carry an infection that corrupts anyone they attack. So Kurien walks out of 12 years of solitary confinement directly into this absolute nightmare landscape.
But he doesn't leave the vault alone.
Exactly. During his chaotic escape through the subterranean vault tunnels, he rescues someone. He stumbles across another tortured Sanite, a woman named Sharina.
Sharina's introduction is pivotal to the thematic evolution of the story. She is introduced in a terribly gaunt, physically broken state. She is wearing a filthy, blood-stained medical gown, having just violently killed her own interrogator.
She is not a damsel in distress.
Not at all. She is every bit as traumatized and defensive as Kurien, if not significantly more so.
And their meeting triggers a crucial mechanical and emotional turning point regarding how Sanite magic functions. They are hiding in the blasted ruins of the surface, trying to assess their surroundings, and Kurien notices a small, bleeding laceration on Sharina's hand.
Right, a very small injury.
Instinctively, he reaches out to use his vitae to close the wound. But because his internal control is completely fractured from the vault, and because they share this rare Sanite biology, something completely unexpected and highly volatile occurs. His dense black vitae forcefully flows out of his finger and directly into her open veins.
It bypasses the mechanics of a simple healing spell completely. The transfer of pure Sanite vitae acts as a massive biological catalyst.
How does it affect her?
It violently and entirely restores her malnourished body. Her dull hair instantly regains its sheen, her atrophied muscles rebuild themselves in seconds. But the energetic cost of this transfer is immense. It forcefully weaves their biologies together, creating a permanent, soul-deep blood bond.
They fundamentally share a pulse from that moment on. They develop an instantaneous psychic link. And this is where I really have to step back and examine the emotional architecture Kirk is building here.
It's very complex.
Think about it from Kurien's perspective. He just spent 12 agonizing years being tortured in a sensory deprivation Iron Maiden, specifically because of his undying, completely self-sacrificing love for Myasuchi. He lost his mind to preserve her political power.
That was his anchor.
And the very second he escapes, his magical biology forcefully and accidentally binds his soul to a complete stranger. How is a reader supposed to process that kind of romantic whiplash? It feels incredibly jarring, almost cruel to the protagonist.
It is undeniably cruel. But that cruelty is the exact point of the narrative pivot. The story is violently forcing Kurien, and by extension, the reader, to recognize that the past is irreparably dead.
He can't go back.
The stoic enforcer who loved Myasuchi died in that vault. The blood bond with Sharina is the inescapable physical manifestation of his new reality. He cannot rewind the clock, no matter how desperately his fractured mind wants to return to the library and the Velvet Lounge.
That makes a lot of sense.
And this violent transition forces us into the deepest, most surreal and metaphysical segment of the entire novel.
Because Kurien now has to navigate this incredibly intense, unearned intimacy with Sharina, but his mind is still held hostage by the ghosts of his past. He is carrying his unresolved trauma around like a physical weight.
It's literally haunting him.
And the world outside is highly adapted to exploit that exact kind of psychological vulnerability. Which brings us to the terrifying encounter with the creature known as the puppeteer.
The sequence with the puppeteer is an absolute masterstroke of psychological horror and narrative payoff.
It's so scary.
As Kurien and Sharina attempt to navigate the ruins of Roland, they are stalked by this specific variant of anti-san. A puppeteer is a highly advanced predatory creature that utilizes sophisticated psychic illusions to disorient and hunt its prey.
And because it can read the surface of Kurien's fractured mind, it instantly recognizes his deepest vulnerability.
It knows exactly what to do.
It projects the exact flawless image of Myasuchi. It mimics the soft cadence of her voice, her precise mannerisms, the tint of her spectacles. It stands in the ruins and taunts him. It asks him if he is too shallow to love her true, monstrous form.
Which is such a low blow.
It weaponizes his guilt, forcing him to confront the agonizing possibility that the regal woman he sacrificed everything for is either dead or worse, completely corrupted into a monster.
It is a devastating trap. To survive the physical encounter, Kurien is forced to physically strike out. He drives a dagger directly into the chest of the creature, shattering the psychic illusion.
But the damage is done.
Yes. While he wins the physical skirmish, the emotional damage is catastrophic. The physical act of driving a blade into the image of his lost love forces his tightly compartmentalized internal trauma to reach a violently boiling point.
And this is where the narrative shifts fully inward. We leave the ruined streets and enter the metaphysical landscape of Kurien's own mind. Inside his psyche, the text describes an entity referred to as the Black Lotus.
The Black Lotus represents the most complex, conceptually dense aspect of the novel's internal mythology.
How would you explain it?
Due to the severity of his trauma and the inherently reality-bending nature of Sanite magic, this entity is not merely a poetic metaphor for grief. It is a localized, quasi-sentient manifestation within his consciousness.
So it's real to him.
Very real. It contains the shared essence, the lingering memories, and the overwhelming emotional weight of the twin sisters, Myasuchi and Rikuko. It is the crystallized embodiment of his guilt, his unresolved love, and his profound failure to protect them.
So what does this all mean for the immediate story? We have a protagonist whose physical mind is acting as a literal battleground.
The three-way war.
He has the feral demon of malice screaming for control. He has this guilt-ridden Black Lotus entity desperately clutching onto the souls of his past loves. And he has his new physically bonded partner, Sharina, standing right in front of him, trying to keep him tethered to the waking world. I need you to break down the mechanics of this climactic internal battle because it is incredibly dense.
The conflict erupts because the Black Lotus, heavily fueled by Kurien's internalized rage and the volatile power of the demon aspect, views Sharina as an existential threat.
He wants her gone.
The entity violently rejects her presence. It sees Sharina as a usurper, someone actively trying to steal Kurien away from the sacred memory of Myasuchi and Rikuko. Consequently, the demon utilizes this inner turmoil to bypass Kurien's defenses and seizes total control of his physical body. Its sole objective is to murder Sharina in order to protect his tragic, isolated grief.
It is horrifying to read. He raises his mutated, bladed claws against her. He generates kinetic air sides that physically slice her skin. The terror comes from the fact that we, as the reader, know Kurien is screaming inside, entirely unwilling to hurt her, but he has been reduced to a helpless passenger inside his own violently acting body.
But this is where Kirk subverts traditional fantasy combat tropes entirely.
Because Sharina doesn't fight back.
Right. Sharina is a highly capable evoker. Under normal circumstances, she could easily mount a formidable defense against him. But she profoundly understands the psychological stakes. She realizes that engaging the demon in physical combat will only validate its rage and fracture Kurien's mind even further.
So what does she do?
In a beautifully horrific display of absolute devotion, she actively refuses to fight.
She throws her weapons down. She entirely drops her magical defenses.
She steps forward and exposes her bare neck to his descending claws. She offers to let his demonic side kill her without resistance.
That is just intense trust.
She surrenders her life entirely to prove a singular, unassailable point. She will not abandon him, she will not fight him, and she will not fear him. She will accept whatever broken, monstrous form he takes, even if it guarantees her own death.
Wow.
In doing so, she proves that she is fundamentally different from the society that locked him away, and different from the woman who handed him over to the Inquisitors.
It delivers the ultimate emotional catharsis of the story. Seeing Sharina's completely selfless sacrifice, her genuine willingness to die rather than contribute to his pain, shatters the demon's hold over his psyche.
The trust anchors him.
The sheer weight of her trust acts as an anchor. Kurien's true consciousness finally breaks through the chains of his trauma. He forces the demon back down into the depths of his mind, violently halting his own arm just inches from severing her neck.
And crucially, the resolution is not found in simply defeating the demon. Kurien turns his focus inward to address the grieving Lotus entity.
He talks to it.
He does not try to destroy his painful memories of Myasuchi and Rikuko. Instead, he finally reconciles with them. He accepts that the past is gone and the pain is permanent. But he makes the conscious choice to honor Sharina's incredible devotion in the present. He internally promises to stop living among the ashes of a destroyed world.
It is a profound, hard-earned moment of agency. He reclaims sovereignty over his own mind. But true to form, the external world of Kirk's novel does not pause to let the characters enjoy their emotional breakthroughs.
No, the world doesn't care.
Just as Kurien finds his footing and accepts his bond with Sharina, the narrative brings the massive real-world consequences of his 12-year absence crashing down upon his head.
This consequence is highlighted most poignantly during a sequence where Kurien explores the ruins and unexpectedly runs into an old acquaintance, Tippin.
Oh, the Tippin reunion. This sequence absolutely broke my heart.
Oh, so sad.
If you remember from the early chapters in the city, Tippin is portrayed as this funny, slightly annoying, lighthearted Sans friend. He's the guy who throws chalk at Kurien from a bridge just to get his attention. He provides the necessary comic relief in a very grim setting. But when Kurien encounters him in the ruins 12 years later, well, the man is entirely unrecognizable.
Tippin has been forged into a heavily scarred, brutally hardened mercenary. He is deeply addicted to synthetic combat drugs just to cope with the reality of his existence.
And he's not happy to see Kurien.
No. When he sees Kurien, he does not express relief. He is blindingly furious. He survived the apocalypse, but he had to do it alone. He screams at Kurien, vehemently detailing how, because Kurien seemingly abandoned his post, the normal citizens of Rwantha were left entirely defenseless when the factions attacked.
Tippin was basically forced to become a violent monster simply to survive the collapsing streets.
Right.
The anger is so raw that he actually attacks Kurien. He takes a blade and slashes Kurien's back wide open. It is a brilliant narrative choice because it grounds this massive, sweeping, epic fantasy in incredibly localized, visceral, emotional consequences.
It grounds the story.
Kurien's 12-year absence in the vault didn't just serve as a cool time jump to advance the plot. It tangibly destroyed the lives of the ordinary people he had sworn an oath to protect.
It ruthlessly strips away any lingering romanticized view of Kurien's initial sacrifice. He's submitted to the Inquisitors to save one woman, Myasuchi. But that singular choice ultimately doomed thousands of innocent citizens. And Tippin stands right in front of him as the living, breathing, hate-filled evidence of that systemic failure.
Kurien is forced to face the music of his own choices. And much like Sharina's reaction to the demon, Kurien refuses to fight back against Tippin. He accepts the physical blows.
He takes the punishment.
He lets Tippin cut him because he knows, deep down, he absolutely deserves the anger. It is a moment of profound humility. But just as they're navigating the heavy emotional toll of this reunion, the physical world around them violently interrupts. The ground literally shakes.
The narrative beautifully orchestrates its climax here,
Right.
bringing all the disparate threads to a singular, awe-inspiring point. The dust from a massive, distant explosion sweeps across the ruined wasteland, clearing the horizon. Kurien and Sharina look out into the distance and see something architecturally impossible.
A colossal, multi-tiered black spire reaching incredibly high into the heavens. It was absolutely not there the day before. The scale of it is incomprehensible. I mean, the text describes the foundational footings alone as being the size of entire city blocks. It towers over the devastation like a monument to their insignificance.
The sheer scale of the structure carries a terrifying implication. The older characters recognize the geometry and what it signifies. The San Vitae have returned to the physical plane.
The San Vitae. The original, incomprehensibly powerful, godlike beings who first fell from the celestial scar centuries ago. The beings who originally harnessed Vitae and shaped the entire geopolitical structure of the world before vanishing.
Their sudden reappearance renders every preceding conflict entirely meaningless.
It's all petty squabbles now.
Exactly. The bitter political squabbles of the Santerrie Council, the fanatical zealotry of the Humanities, even the creeping dread of the anti-San hordes, all of it is instantly dwarfed. It is no longer a war for territory. It is a war for the survival of the species in the face of returning gods.
It sets the stage for the next installment perfectly. Kirk leaves you with this incredibly potent, unforgettable image. You have a deeply broken protagonist who is still carrying the heavy ghosts of his past inside his mind. He has finally managed to accept a new, terrifyingly deep emotional bond with Sharina.
He's ready, but barely.
He is standing waist deep in the smoldering ashes of his old life, staring up at a monolithic spire, facing down an apocalyptic war against divine entities.
It showcases a remarkable evolution of narrative scope. San Vitae. The awakening refuses to remain stagnant. It meticulously begins as a localized, gritty noir detective story centered on a bodyguard managing corrupt city politics.
Then it pivots.
It deliberately descends into the claustrophobic, harrowing depths of survival horror within the Inquisitor's vault, and it finally blooms outward into a massive, sprawling, apocalyptic fantasy epic.
And the pacing never gives you a moment to comfortably rest. We wanted to provide you with this comprehensive roadmap before you delve into the book yourself. We wanted you to experience that profound aha moment of understanding, seeing exactly how the complex magic system, the volatile vitae, and the whispering demon are intrinsically, mechanically tied to the deep psychological trauma of the characters.
That connection is key.
In this world, the magic isn't just about casting fireballs to defeat an enemy. The magic is a direct, violent reflection of their internal grip on sanity.
Grasping that foundational connection is the master key to fully appreciating the depth of Kirk's world building. The visceral physical battles in the wasteland are always, without exception, secondary to the agonizing psychological wars being fought within the confines of the characters' own minds.
Absolutely. So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought, something provocative to mull over long after this audio finishes.
Let's hear it.
Throughout the entirety of the narrative, the Vati demon is consistently treated by the characters as a symptom of madness, a horrific, unavoidable side effect of wielding too much celestial power.
That's the accepted truth.
But if we look closely at its actions, we see contradictions. Consider how the demon occasionally acts with bizarre, almost purposeful compassion, like when it gently heals Myasuchi, but deliberately leaves a tiny scar to remind her of her sacrifice.
That was a very specific choice by the author.
Or consider how it violently forces Kurien to stop hiding within his comfortable hallucinations and confront the agonizing truths of his reality. So, here's the question. What if the demon isn't a symptom of madness at all? What if the demon is actually the true, untainted, localized consciousness of a broken world, and the humans desperately trying to control it are the ones who are truly mad?
That is a deeply chilling, paradigm-shifting lens through which to view the entire novel.
It changes everything. Let that pristine X-ray machine stay broken. The murky, unpredictable waters are exactly where the most compelling stories live. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of San Vitae, The Awakening. Keep exploring the shadows of the books you read and always stay curious.